Welcome back. It is time for Wise Guys Wednesday. I Professor Paul Kwiat is going to tell us how fast things really fall.
Hi guys, nice to see you again. I hope you're doing well in these troubling times. This is going to be the first of a three-parter Wise Guy. Today we're going to start talking about how fast things fall. Now, I'm sure you remember that if you're in vacuum and you drop a feather and a penny, then they will in fact fall at the same rate, just accelerated by gravity. But we want to instead consider what happens when we're falling through air or through some other fluid. So let's start with just a quick demo, because you know I love demos. So I have here an empty glass container and a cylinder that's filled with water, and I just have two rubber corks, and I'm just going to drop these into these two, and I'm sure you know what's going to happen, which is that the one which goes through the water falls much more slowly because of the fact that it's being resisted by the water. So in fact, it comes to this terminal velocity and then no longer accelerates, and that's what we want to talk about today. So this is what occurs when you have these two counter forces operating on a falling object. So on the one hand, there's gravity, which is just equal to the mass of the object times the acceleration of gravity, little g, 9.8 meters per second squared. And on the other hand, we have the resistance of the drag from whatever the object is falling through. So for example, the air density or water density, if the water is more dense, so of course there'll be more drag. The drag is also proportional to the area of the object, which makes sense. The bigger it is, the more you have to push other air particles out of the way. It also depends on the square of the velocity and this coefficient, the drag coefficient, which is just a number. For spheres, it's a half, and for other objects, it's going to be bigger or less than a half, depending on the shape of the object. So what happens when the object first starts falling is it's moving very slowly, so there's not much drag resistance, which means that the force of gravity accelerates that, the velocity goes up, and as it continues to go up, eventually this drag force becomes equal to the force of gravity, and in that case, there's no net force on the object, and then its velocity is just stuck at the terminal velocity. And if we do a calculation of that, we'll find that it's just given by the square root of twice the mass times little g divided by the air density, the area of the object, cross-sectional area, and this drag coefficient. So I plotted that here as a function of the size of an object, but this is a little strange how I've done it. So I picked an object here which has the mass of a golf ball, but I've let the object either be smaller than a golf ball or be larger than a golf ball. And the yellow spot here is what we get for a golf ball sized object that weighs the same as a golf ball. It has a terminal velocity of something like 30 meters a second, or almost 70 miles an hour. So you'd have a hard time heading a golf ball to go much faster than 70 miles an hour. So let's just see if we can demonstrate any of the features of this. So we see that the velocity goes up as the mass goes up and goes down as the area goes up. So let me stop sharing my screen and do two other quick demos here. So the first one, we're going to do another race. So I have two cylinders that are filled with water, and I'm going to race these two plastic plugs. They have the same area basically, except the black one has some metal, which makes it quite a bit heavier. So I'm sure you can predict what's going to happen here, which is that when I drop these, the red one falls a lot slower because it has the smaller mass. Okay, the other thing I want to compare are these two sheets of paper. Now, these are each just one sheet of paper. Here it's crumpled up very small. Here it's not, but they have the same mass, and I'm just going to drop them. And again, I'm sure you have a sense of what's going to happen, which is that the small one is going to hit first. I'll even drop them from higher up. It'll be more clear then. Okay, so the small one hits first. This is the same reason that, for example, when skydivers are skydiving, they put their arms and their legs out to try and make a bigger cross-sectional area, so that in that case, they will fall more slowly. Okay, so let's just go back to my screen here. So the other thing I might calculate, which is maybe a little more realistic, is an object which has a constant density, like a drop of water or a water balloon or something like that, or a person. And in that case, we get a totally different behavior. So previously, the terminal velocity went down as the object got bigger. In this case, though, as the object gets bigger, its mass goes up. because the mass is proportional to the volume of the object. So that goes like the length cubed, and the cross-sectional area just goes like the length squared. So now the terminal velocity increases as the square root of the size of the object. And that's plotted here. So here's our previous golf ball at its 30 meters a second. If instead I were to drop, say, a bowling ball, it will have a terminal velocity of something more like 80 meters a second. So that's really moving very, very fast. The blue curve is if you have water instead. So obviously a bowling ball is a little more dense than water, which is why it falls a little bit, has a little higher velocity. Okay, next time we're going to talk about what happens when we have much smaller objects, and we're going to see that this behavior changes in a really extraordinary way, and that's going to be really relevant for explaining all kinds of things. For example, why is it that clouds don't just fall out of the sky? Okay, but for that, you'll have to come back next week. Hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.